Within the Truth in Lending Act at the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 1026, I want to say point 5, I had a couple things to finish before going into point 6, account opening disclosures. Those particular items were home equity plans. Disclosures for home equity plans shall be made in accordance with the timing requirements of that section. Basis of disclosures and use of estimates. Disclosures shall reflect the terms of the legal obligation between the parties. If any information necessary for accurate disclosure is unknown to the creditor, it shall make the disclosure based on the best information reasonably available and shall state clearly that the disclosure is an estimate. Multiple creditors, multiple consumers. If the credit plan involves more than one creditor, only one set of disclosure shall be given, and the creditors shall agree among themselves which creditor must comply with the requirements that this part imposes on any of them. If there is more than one consumer, the disclosures may be made to any consumer who is primarily liable in the account. If the right of rescission under 1026.15 is applicable, however, the disclosures required by 1026.6 and 1026.15b shall be made to each consumer having the right to rescind. Effect of subsequent events. If a disclosure becomes inaccurate because of an event that occurs after the creditor mails or delivers the disclosures, the resulting inaccuracy is not a violation of this part, although new disclosures may be required under 1026.9. Account opening disclosures. Rules affecting home equity plans. The requirements of this paragraph apply only to home equity plans subject to the requirements of 1026.40. A creditor shall disclose the items in this section to the extent applicable. Finance charge. The circumstances under which the finance charge will be imposed and an explanation of how it will be determined as follows. A statement of when finance charges begin to accrue, including an explanation of whether or not any time period exists within which any credit extension may be repaid without incurring a finance charge. If such a time period is provided, a creditor may, at its option and without disclosure, impose no finance charge when payment is received after the time period's expiration. A disclosure of each periodic rate that may be used to compute the finance charge, the range of balances to which it is applicable, and the corresponding APR. If a creditor offers a variable rate plan, the creditor shall also disclose the circumstances under which the rates may increase, any limitations on the increase, and the effects of an increase. When different periodic rates apply to different types of transactions, the types of transactions to which the periodic rates shall apply shall also be disclosed. A creditor is not required to adjust the range of balances disclosure to reflect the balance below, which only a minimum charge applies. An explanation of the method used to determine the balance on which the finance charge may be computed. An explanation of how the amount of any finance charge will be determined, including a description of how any finance charge other than the periodic rate will be determined. Other charges. The amount of any charge other than a finance charge that may be imposed as part of a plan, or an explanation of how the charge will be determined. Home equity plan information. The following disclosure described in 1026.40d as applicable. A statement of the conditions under which the creditor may take certain action, as described in 1026.40d.4.1, such as terminating the plan or changing the terms. The payment information described in 1026.40d.5.1 and 2 for both the draw period and any repayment period. A statement that negative amortization may occur as described in D9. A statement of any transaction requirements as described in D10. A statement regarding the tax implications as described in D11. A statement that the APR imposed under the plan does not include costs other than interest as described in D6 and D12.2. The variable rate disclosures described in D12.3, 8, 10, 11, and 12, as well as the disclosure described in 40D53 unless the disclosure is provided with the application wherein a form the consumer could keep and included a representative payment example for the category of payment option chosen by the consumer. Security interest. The fact that the creditor has or will acquire a security interest in the property purchased under the plan or in other property identified by item or type. Statement of billing rights. A statement that outlines the consumer's rights and the creditor's responsibilities under 1026-12C and 1026-13, and that is substantially similar to the statement found in Model Form G3 or at the creditor's option G3A and Appendix G to this part. Rules affecting open-end non-home secured plans. The requirements of paragraph B of the section apply to plans other than home equity plans subject to the requirements of 1026-40. So for just non-home secured open-end credit plans, the form of disclosures is a tabular format. For open-end non-home secured plans, creditors must provide the account opening disclosures specified in paragraph B21 through B25 except for B21D2 and B27 through 14 of the section in the form of a table with the headings, content, and format substantially similar to any of the applicable tables in G17 and Appendix J. Highlighting, this is B11. In a table, any APR required to be disclosed pursuant to paragraph B21 of this section, any introductory rate permitted to the disclosed pursuant to paragraph B2IB or required to be disclosed under paragraph B2IF of this section, any rate that will apply after a premium initial rate expires permitted to be disclosed pursuant to paragraph B2IC or required to be disclosed pursuant to paragraph B2IF, and any fee or percentage amounts or maximum limits on fee amounts disclosed pursuant to paragraphs B22, B24, B27 through 12 of this section must be disclosed in bold text. However, bold text shall not be used for the amount of any periodic fee disclosed pursuant to paragraph B2 of this section that is not an annualized amount, and other annual percentage rates or fee amounts disclosed in the table. Location. Only the information required or permitted by paragraphs B21 through 5 except for 21D2 and B27 through 14 of the section shall be in a table. Disclosures required by B21D2 and B2D3 and B26 and B215 of this section shall be placed directly below the table. Disclosures required by paragraphs B3 through 5 of the section that are not otherwise required to be in the table and other information shall be presented with the account agreement or account opening disclosure agreement statement, I should say, provided such information appears outside the required table. Fees that vary by state. Creditors that impose fees referred to in paragraphs B27 through B211 of this section that vary by state and that provide the disclosures required by paragraph B of this section in person at the time the open-end non-home secured plan is established in connection with financing the purchase of goods or services may, at the creditor's option, disclose in the account opening table the specific fee applicable to the consumer's account or the range of fees if the disclosure includes a statement that the amount of the fee varies by state and refers the consumer to the account agreement on or other disclosure provided with the account opening table where the amount of the fee applicable to the consumer's account is disclosed. The creditor may not list fees for multiple states in the account opening summary table. Fees based on a percentage. This is B14? Yeah, B14. If the amount of any fee required to be disclosed under this section is determined on the basis of a percentage of another amount, the percentage used and the identification of the amount against which the percentage is applied may be disclosed instead of the amount of the fee. This is B2, required disclosures for account opening table for open-end non-home secured plans. A creditor shall disclose the items in this section to the extent applicable. And you have the APR as I, Roman numeral I. Each periodic rate that may be used to compute the fine charge on an outstanding balance for purchases, a cash advance, or a balance transfer expressed as an APR as determined by 102614B when more than one rate applies for a category of transactions. The range of balances to which each rate is applicable shall also be disclosed. The annual percentage rate for purchases disclosed pursuant to this paragraph shall be in at least 16-point type except for the following: a penalty rate that may apply upon the occurrence of one or more specific events. Variable rate information. If a rate disclosed under paragraph B2I of this section is a variable rate, the creditor shall also disclose the fact that the rate may vary and how the rate is determined. In determining how the applicable rate will be determined, the creditor must identify the type of index of formula that is used in setting the rate, the value of the index, and the amount of the margin that are used to calculate the variable rate shall not be disclosed in the table. A disclosure of any applicable limitations on rate increases or decreases shall not be included in the table. Discounted initial rates. The initial rate is an introductory rate, as that term is defined in 102616G22. The creditor must disclose the rate that would otherwise apply to the account pursuant to paragraph B2I of this section. Where the rate is not tied to an index or formula, the creditor must disclose the rate that will apply after the introductory rate expires. In a variable rate account, the creditor must disclose a rate based on the applicable index or formula in accord with the accuracy requirements of paragraph B4 to G of this section. Except as provided in paragraph B2IF of this section, the creditor is not required to but may disclose in the table the introductory rate along with the rate that would otherwise apply to the account if the creditor also discloses the time period during which the introductory rate will remain in effect, and uses the term introductory or intro in immediate proximity to the introductory rate. Premium initial rate. The initial rate is temporary and is higher than the rate that will apply after the temporary rate expires. The creditor must disclose the premium initial rate pursuant to paragraph B2I of this section. Consistent with paragraph B2I of this section, the premium initial rate for purchases must be in at least 16-point type, except as provided in paragraphs B2IF of this section. The creditor is not required to, but may disclose in the table the rate that will apply after the premium initial rate expires if the creditor also discloses the time period during which the premium initial rate will remain in effect. If the creditor also discloses in the table the rate that will apply after the premium initial rate for purchases expires, that rate also must be in at least 16-point type. Penalty rates in general. Except as provided in paragraph B2ID2 and B2ID3 of this section, if a rate may increase as a penalty for one or more events specified in the account agreement, such as a late payment or an extension of credit that exceeds the credit limit, the creditor must disclose pursuant to paragraph B2I of this section the increased rate that may apply, a brief description of the event or events that may result in the increased rate, and a brief description of how long the increased rate will remain in effect. If more than one penalty rate may apply, the creditor at adoption may disclose the highest rate that could apply instead of disclosing the specific rates or the range of rates that could apply. 2. Introductory rates. If the creditor discloses in a table an introductory rate as that term defined in 102616G to Roman numeral 2, creditors must briefly disclose directly beneath the table the circumstances under which the introductory rate may be revoked and the rate that will apply after the introductory rate is revoked. 3. Employee preferential rates. If a creditor discloses in a table a preferential annual percentage rate for which only employees of the creditor, employees of a third party, or other individuals with similar affiliations with the creditor or third party, such as executive officers, directors, or principal shareholders, are eligible, the creditor must briefly disclose directly beneath the table the circumstances under which such preferential rate may be revoked and the rate that will apply after such preferential rate is revoked. E. Point of sale where APRs vary by state or based on creditworthiness. Creditors imposing annual percentage rates that vary by state are or based on the consumer's creditworthiness and providing the disclosures required by paragraph B of this section in person at the time the open-end, not home-secured plan is established in connection with financing the purchase of goods or services may, at the creditor's option, disclose pursuant to paragraph B21 of this section in an account opening table 1. The specific annual percentage rate applicable to the consumer's account, or 2. The range of the APRs if the disclosure includes a statement that the APR varies by state or will be determined based on the consumer's creditworthiness and refers the consumer to the account agreement or other disclosure provided with the account opening table where the APR applicable to the consumer's account is disclosed. A creditor may not list APRs for multiple states in the account opening table. F. Credit card accounts under an open-end, non-home secured consumer credit plan, notwithstanding paragraphs B2 Roman numeral IB and B2 IC of this section. For credit card accounts under an open-end, non-home secured plan, issuers must disclose in a table any introductory rate as that term is defined in 1026-16G2 Roman numeral 2 that would apply to the account consistent with the requirements of paragraph B2 IB of this section, and number 2, any rate that would apply upon the expiration of a premium initial rate consistent with the requirements of paragraph B2 IC of this section. Fees for insurance or availability. A. Any 2A, Roman numeral 2A, so that's what, 4-2A, I don't know. Any annual or other periodic fee that may be imposed for the issuance or availability of an open-end plan, including any fee based on account activity or inactivity, how frequently it will be imposed, and the annualized amount of the fee. B. Any non-periodic rate that relates to opening the plan. A creditor must disclose that the fee is a one-time fee. And 3. Fixed finance charge, minimum interest charge. Any fixed finance charge and a brief description of the charge. Any minimum interest charge if it exceeds $1 that could be imposed during the billing cycle, and a brief description of the charge. The $1 threshold amount shall be adjusted periodically by the Bureau to reflect changes in the CPI. The Bureau shall calculate each year a price level adjusted minimum interest charge using the CPI in effect on the June 1 of that year. When the cumulative change in the adjusted minimum value derived from applying the annual consumer price level to the current minimum interest charge threshold has risen by a whole $1, the minimum interest charge will be increased by $1. The creditor may, at his option, disclose in the table minimum interest charges below this threshold. Transaction charges. Any transaction charge imposed by the creditor for use of the open-end plan for purchases. And grace period. So transaction charges is Roman numeral 4, grace period 5, balance computation method 6, cash advance fee 7, late payment fee 8, over the limit fee 9, balance transfer fee 10, return payment fee 11. Let's go with grace period, the date by which the period within which any credit extended may be repaid without incurring a finance charge due to a periodic interest rate, and any conditions on the availability of the grace period. If no grace period is provided, the fact must be disclosed. If the length of the grace period varies, the creditor may disclose the range of days, the minimum number of days, or the average number of the days in the grace period if the disclosure is identified as a range, minimum or average. In disclosing in the tabular format a grace period that applies to all features on the account, the phrase, "How to avoid paying interest," shall be used as the heading for the row describing the grace period. If a grace period is not offered on all features of the account in disclosing this fact in the tabular format, the phrase, "Paying interest," shall be used as the heading for the row describing this fact. Balance computation method, the Roman numeral 6, the name of the balance computation method listed in 1026.60G that is used to determine the balance on which the finance charge is computed for each feature, or an explanation of the method used if it is not listed, along with a statement that an explanation of the methods required by paragraph B4 1D of this section is provided with the account opening disclosures and determining which balance computation method to disclose. The creditor shall assume the credit extended will be repaid within any grace period, if any. Cash advance fee, any fee imposed for an extension of credit in the form of cash or its equivalent. 8. Late payment fee, any fee imposed for a late payment. 9. Of limit fee, the same. 10. The same for balance transfer fee, a fee imposed to transfer an outstanding balance. And return payment fee, any fee imposed by the creditor for a return payment. Required insurance, debt cancellation, or debt suspension coverage. Roman numeral 12. A fee for insurance described in 1026.4b7 or debt cancellation or suspension coverage described in 1026.4b10 if the insurance or debt cancellation or suspension coverage is required as part of the plan. And B, a cross-reference to any additional information provided about the insurance or coverage as applicable. Roman numeral 13. Available credit. If a creditor requires fees for the issuance or availability of credit described in paragraph B2, Roman numeral 2 that is, of this section, or requires a security deposit for such credit, and the total amount of those required fees and or security deposit that will be imposed and charged to the account when the account is opened is 15% or more of the minimum credit limit for the plan, a creditor must disclose the available credit remaining after these fees or security deposit are debited to the account. The determination whether the 15% threshold is met must be based on the minimum credit limit for the plan. However, the disclosure provided under this paragraph must be based on the actual initial credit limit provided on the account. In determining whether the 15% threshold test is met, the creditor must only consider fees for issuance or availability of credit or a security deposit that are required. If fees for issuance or availability are optional, these fees should not be considered in determining whether the disclosure must be given. Nonetheless, if the 15% threshold test is met, the creditor, in providing the disclosure, must disclose the amount of available credit calculated by excluding those optional fees and the available credit including those optional fees. The creditor shall also disclose that the consumer has the right to reject the plan and not be obligated to pay those fees or any other fee or charges until the consumer has used the account or made a payment on the account after receiving a periodic statement. This paragraph does not apply with respect to fees or security deposits that are not debited to the account. Roman numeral 14, website reference. For issuers of credit cards that are not charge cards, a reference to the website established by the Bureau and a statement that consumers may obtain on the website information about shopping for and using credit cards. Until January 1, 2013, issuers may substitute for this reference a reference to the website established by the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Billing error rights reference. A statement that information about consumers' right to dispute transactions is included in the account opening disclosures. Disclosure of charges imposed as part of open-end non-home secured plans. A creditor shall disclose, to the extent applicable, for charges imposed as part of an open-end non-home secured plan, the circumstances under which the charge may be imposed, including the amount of the charge, or an explanation of how the charge is determined. For finance charges, a statement of when the charge begins to accrue, and explanation of whether or not any time period exists within which any credit that has been extended may be repaid without incurring the charge. If such a time period is provided, the creditor may, at its option and without disclosure, elect not to impose a finance charge when payment is received after the time period expires. Charges imposed as part of the plan are finance charges identified under 1026.4a and 1026.4b. Charges resulting from the consumer's failure to use the plan as agreed, except amounts payable for collection activity after default, attorney's fees, whether or not automatically imposed, and post-judgment interest rates permitted by law. C. Taxes imposed on the credit transaction, and I think this is all within website disclosures. Taxes imposed on the credit transaction by state or other governmental bodies, such as documentary stamp taxes on cash advances, and charges for which the payment or non-payment affect the consumer's access to the plan, the duration of the plan and amount of credit extended, the period for which credit is extended, or the timing or method of billing or payment. E. Charges imposed for terminating a plan. F. Charges for voluntary credit insurance, debt cancellation, or debt suspension. Roman numeral 3. Charges that are not imposed as part of the plan include A through C. A. Charges imposed on a cardholder by an institution other than the card issuer for the use of the other institution's ATM in a shared or interchange system. B. A charge for a package of services that includes an open-end credit feature. If the fee is required whether or not an open-end credit feature is included in the non-credit services are not merely incidental to the credit feature. C. Charges under 1026.4e disclosed as specified. 4. Disclosure of rates for open and non-home secured plans. A creditor shall disclose to the extent applicable Roman numeral I for each periodic rate that may be used to calculate interest. A, B, C, and D. A. Rates, the rate expressed as a periodic rate and a corresponding annual percentage rate. B. Range of balances, the range of balances to which the rate is applicable. However, a creditor is not required to adjust the range of balances disclosure to reflect the balance below which only a minimum charge applies. C. Type of transaction, the type of transaction to which the rate applies if different rates apply to different types of transactions. And D. Balance computation method, an explanation of the method used to determine the balance to which the rate is applied. Variable rate accounts for interest rate changes that are tied to increases in an index or formula. Variable rate accounts specifically set forth in the account agreement. A. The fact that the annual percentage rate may increase. B. How the rate is determined, including the margin. C. The circumstances under which the rate may increase. D. The frequency with which the rate may increase. E. Any limitation on the amount the rate may change. And F. The effect of an increase. G. Except as specified in paragraphs B4, Roman numeral 2H of the section, a rate is accurate if it is a rate of a specified date and this rate was in effect within the last 30 days before the disclosures are provided. H. Creditors imposing APRs that vary according to an index that is not under the credit's control that provide the disclosures required by paragraph B of this section in person at the time the open-end not home secured plan is established in connection with financing the purchase of goods or services may disclose in the table a range of rates to the extent permitted by 1026.6b2 Roman numeral 1e that was in effect within the last 90 days before the disclosures are provided, along with a reference directing the consumer to the account agreement or other disclosure provided with the account opening table where an annual percentage rate applicable to the consumer's account in effect within the last 30 days before the disclosures are provided is disclosed. Roman numeral 3, rate changes not due to index or formula. 4. Interest rate changes are specifically set forth in the account agreement and not tied to increases in an index or formula. A. The initial rate expressed as a periodic rate and a corresponding annual percentage rate required under paragraph B4IA of this section. B. How long the initial rate will remain in effect and the specific events that cause the initial rate to change. C. The rate expressed as a periodic rate and a corresponding annual percentage rate that will apply when the initial rate is no longer in effect, and any limitation on the time period the new rate will remain in effect. D. The balances to which the new rate will apply. E. The balances to which the current rate at the time of the change will apply. 5. Additional disclosures for open and non-home secured plans. A creditor shall disclose, to the extent applicable, voluntary credit insurance, debt cancellation, or debt suspension. The disclosures in 1026.4d1i and d1.2 and d3i through d3. 3. If the creditor offers optional credit insurance or debt cancellation or debt suspension coverage that is identified in 1026.4b7 or b10. 2. Security interest. The fact that the creditor has or will acquire security interest in the property purchased under the plan or in other property identified by item or type. And 3. Statement of billing rights, a statement that outlines the consumer's rights and the creditor's responsibilities under 1026.12c and 1026.13, and that is substantially similar to the statement found in Model Form G3A in Appendix G to this part.